Our story begins before European expansion to the New World, when the San Bruno Mountains were alive with rabbits and deer, and the shores of San Francisco Bay yielded an abundance of shellfish. Then, tribes of Native Americans known collectively as the Ohlone inhabited the Bay Area and the mountain slopes where the city of Brisbane is found today. By 1776, the Spanish had arrived and the Franciscan missionaries soon followed. Then the mountains provided grazing lands for the sheep and cattle of Mission Dolores de San Francisco de Assisi. At the end of the mission period in California, these same lands were secularized and disposed of as part of the Mexican land grants of the 1830s and 1840s. In 1837, the first grant in this area was made to Jacob P. Lease, who subsequently lost most of Rancho Cañada de Guadalupe, La Visitacion, y Rodeo Viejo in proceedings involving a gambling debt. His misfortune benefited Charles Crocker, who purchased over 3,000 acres of the grant in 1884 for token payment. Crocker's holdings eventually passed to the Crocker Land Company, a commercial venture generating revenues by ranching and quarrying the land. After the Great San Francisco earthquake of 1906, attention turned to the peninsula as a potential refuge for earthquake victims. In 1908, the first subdivision map in the Brisbane area was recorded, establishing saleable lots in the City of Visitacion, where downtown Brisbane is today. However, there was little development until the 1920s and 30s when the area began to flourish and was named Brisbane. The early settlers built modest homes, small markets, a hotel, and established family-run poultry and dairy ranches. They dug trenches to bring water to their homes and constructed roads. By the late 1930s, the town had a post office, library, public school, volunteer fire department, and weekly newspaper. Those who came to Brisbane in the Great Depression and during and after the Second World War came to forge a new life for their families. Land was cheap and they were able to put up a basic shelter to call home until they could afford better. The community helped. The men with the building, the women with the meals, and the numerous volunteer and civic organizations were there in times of need. It is said that the unique Brisbane spirit was born at that time, the spirit of independence. By the 1950s, Brisbane was well on its way to becoming a modern town. Issues of lack of capital and inadequate civic services and concern that powerful neighbors might dictate Brisbane's future led some citizens to consider incorporation. Others were fearful that becoming a city would result in loss of the small-town character everyone valued. When the county of San Mateo began to discuss bulldozing Brisbane under urban renewal, it brought matters to a head and an election was held. On September 12, 1961, the voters of Brisbane were asked, "Shall the proposed city of Brisbane become incorporated as a general law city?" 1,006 votes were cast. The response was overwhelmingly positive. The newly incorporated city encompassed 2.5 square miles. It was clear that additional land would be necessary to increase the city's tax base and protect Brisbane from inappropriate and environmentally damaging development. Annexation of adjacent Southern Pacific and PG&E properties in 1962 added 700 acres of land to the north and east. Crocker Land Company still owned essentially all of an unincorporated San Bruno Mountain, as well as Crocker Industrial Park in the Guadalupe Valley directly to the north of the city limits. With San Francisco to the north and peninsula cities to the south, area was ripe for development pressure. Over the next 30 years, the small but feisty city of Brisbane led the fight to preserve San Bruno Mountain and the unique character of the city. It was Brisbane that foiled a plan to cut off the top of San Bruno Mountain and dump it as fill into the bay that saved the mountain from becoming the site of a huge development with a projected population of over 60,000 people, and that defeated another proposal to build a high-density housing development with 14 to 20-story high-rises. Brisbane citizens led the battle to preserve San Bruno Mountain as a state and county park, and the city was a signatory to the first habitat conservation plan under the Endangered Species Act, a plan to protect the rare and endangered butterflies on San Bruno Mountain. In 1983, the northeast ridge of San Bruno Mountain and Crocker Industrial Park were annexed to Brisbane as a package, as the industrial park would provide the revenues needed to service any development on the northeast ridge. In 1989, the city approved a development plan for the ridge that was respectful of its place on the mountain and was in full conformance with the Habitat Conservation Plan. The first homes on the ridge were sold in 1996, with new residents moving in during early summer in 1997. In the last years of the first decade of the 21st century, the story of the Northeast Ridge took its final turn. A major amendment to the plan was adopted by the City Council with considerable community input. The project was downsized to 500 units from the original 579, and Calliope Hill was added as dedicated open space. Additionally, funding for the Habitat Conservation Plan and preservation of endangered species on San Bruno Mountain were secured, including a non-wasting endowment of $4 million, which generates enough interest to cover the cost of long-term monitoring and maintenance. Finally, funding was added that was a critical link in allowing the city to move forward with the long-anticipated new Brisbane Library that was opened in 2021. In November 2018, voters in Brisbane approved Measure JJ by a margin of 55-45, which amended the city's general plan as it pertains to the Baylands. The Brisbane Baylands encompasses about 570 upland or above-ground acres, 660 acres total, and is generally bordered on the west by Bayshore Boulevard, north by the City and County of San Francisco, east by US Highway 101, and south by the Brisbane Lagoon. The Baylands was formerly a landfill and a rail yard. As such, extensive site remediation is required. Once remediated, the site holds the promise of new sustainable development, including housing in the northwest quadrant of the site, commercial development, and enhanced open spaces, parks, and trails. And so the story brings us to the present. The history briefly sketched above is colorfully presented in 3 oral histories available to view on the city's website, brisbaneca.org. A Spirit of Independence, Brisbane City of Stars, the first 25 years, and Brisbane City of Stars, 50th anniversary, the second 25 years. In 1992, the city published Born of Fire, Praise of Brisbane Volunteers, which chronicled pictorially how the people of Brisbane started a volunteer fire department in 1932, nearly 30 years before Brisbane incorporated as a general law city in 1961. If you would like a print version of any of the above, please contact the city manager's office at 415-508-2110. An exhibition of historical photographs are also on display at City Hall. Just drop by if you would like to view them. Additional digital collections and online resources can be found at brisbaneca.org/history. As a new resident, visitor, or community member of Brisbane, you are now part of its history and its spirit. Welcome.